Hi, it's Mike from Pro Tools Expert, and we're down at Jigsaw's base in Golden Square in London, and we've had some very interesting presentations this afternoon. One was very interesting, was looking at an orchestral session with Sting at a big outdoor venue, and I'm joined by Donal. Donal, you were responsible for recording that particular project.
Yes, I recorded and mixed it.
And you presumably did splits off the PA system into a separate set of mic pre's or a desk into Pro Tools?
Yeah, it was splits from the front of house and monitors into 80 inputs, Millennia and DAV mic pre's into Apogees into Pro Tools 7.4, I think.
Yes, because it was, what, 2010?
2010. Although that rig still exists at 7.4 because I've always thought of it as a very stable version.
Yeah, I mean, in many respects, 7.4 was one of those sort of anchor points in Pro Tools history of being an incredibly stable system. And of course, presumably it was what, a G5 Mac Pro? And,
yeah, HD3.
Yeah, it just sat there, I mean, and worked, because obviously you need it to be reliable. That's a one-off event. Oh, can we just re-record it, please?
Somebody said to me, what happens if it stops? And at that point, nothing had ever happened to me. And it did happen. And I went, you just put it back in record. And I'd lost once, I lost about 30 seconds of a song live. But it's Pro Tools. So you take another night, edit it out. I've never been caught out yet.
Yes. No, I remember one event where I was the OB truck sustaining engineer. So I wasn't recording it. It was an event with Simply Red, and they were recording front of house onto a rack of DA88s.
Oh, wow, okay.
And partway through the show, their engineer contacted me on talkback and said, they've all got error lights on them, what do I do? So I said, well, there's not very much you can do now. But fortunately, I was tracking, because I was recording the crowd, so I had lots of effects mics out recording the crowd, and I was tracking those onto various tracks of the VT machines. And I also, for some reason, I still don't know why I did it, but I also took a sniff of the lead vocal and put that around. And so what they did is, because the whole show was to click, is they took the tracks from a previous show, because they had the vocal from that show, and stitched it back together again. But yeah, it's just one of those horror moments where you've got a huge OB truck, 14 HD cameras, umpteen ISOs, and it's about to go in the bin. Oh dear, yeah.
Oh, that's a good way of turning it around, though, isn't it?
It's just one of those very fortunate circumstances. Yeah. But so I having spent, and I had my own OB truck for a while, so I'm well aware of these sorts of environments of having backups on backups. But yeah, and this afternoon you were talking about spending 3 hours backing the drives up, and I remember that little scenario very well on a different project where you just needing to actually back up all the material and it taking so long.
Oh, well, yeah, thank God for modern Mac Pros. And I copied that on my current Mac Pro, and I think it took 20 minutes. Thunderbolt, obviously. And yeah, back in the day, 3 hours. Well, we finished around 11 o'clock at night. So then I took the drives into production onto my laptop, which was a faster processor, and then connected them to a G-Tech mini drive and did the backup because I was flying the next day. And I wanted the drives were going to go in the hold. I wanted to carry something with me in my bag.
Yes.
But yeah, just watching the grey line. But I mean, in the day, that was quick.
Yes, indeed.
120 gig in 3 hours felt quick. So, it just all keeps zooming forward, doesn't it?
So what were the challenge this particular event? Just tell us a bit about what the event was that you were talking about this afternoon.
So it was Sting's Symphonicity Tour. He did 2 nights at Red Rocks Amphitheatre in Colorado, which was filmed for A&E's TV program, which is called Private Sessions. And it was 8 songs from the show, and there's interviews, and I've forgotten the name of the lady who ran the show, but that was the basic premise.
And were there any specific challenges in terms of recording that sort of combination of instruments? Because obviously a lot of orchestral instruments in what is normally a fairly alien environment for them.
The project before this one, which was the Winters album we did with Sting, we used orchestra, and we did a show in Durham Cathedral, and I recorded that. And at the time I discovered the DPA 1499 clip-on mic, so I used that to great effect. And then when they started the Symphonicity tour, the front of house guy had already been convinced that the 1499 was the future, so the orchestra was mainly 1499s, which was just brilliant.
How much EQing did you have to do? Because I mean, obviously because they're clipped onto the bridge of the instrument, it's not perhaps the purest sound that one might have.
I had to. Well, I was compromised on the mic pre's, as I said in the presentation, that I had 48 channels of Millennia and 32 channels of DAV, and the DAV is slightly less bottom end than the Millennia. So all the strings, the violins...
Yeah, things that didn't have a huge amount of low end.
I specifically put them through there. But with some ambient mics, I didn't really do a lot of EQing when I looked at the session on the strings. I brightened them a bit more. And really it was going through the tracks and seeing if, because all the classical instruments, musicians aren't so used to using mics, so they're getting banged and knocked. And I just was editing all that out, really, just make the sound. It was amazing how much the sound changed when you edited out unused mics, clicks and bangs, and it just became so much smoother.
Just clean out all the rubbish. Yeah,
exactly.
And then presumably it was a relatively easy mix because you try to make sure that it went down the mic right in the first place.
Yeah, completely. And it's all about Sting's vocal whenever I mix his stuff. So the vocals first, and then I've got in that session, and there's 3 reverbs. I don't think I used them all, and 1 delay. Delay for his voice, just very subtly with some reverb on the end of that to give a bit of extra space in the mix. And then EQ, and just massaging the balance. You know, as the chorus came, maybe just push, the lead guitar in the chorus, but just, it's all very subtle stuff.
Now, you were talking about the fact that you route the tracks out of Pro Tools into an external desk. Was that?
I still work as, I work in the box, but everything's summed. So it's 8 stereo outputs into my 8816 Neve mixer, or into Sting's SSL, 16 channels, mono turned into 8 stereo groups or flat. And then...
but that's purely as a summing amp, the faders are...
Totally summing, yeah, nothing else happening. And I have done on another project, an Italian artist, an acoustic artist. I mixed it at home or in my studio with the Neve 8816 summed. And then I went to Italy to work with Sting, and I thought I'll take the files just in case there's an edit. And I got an email saying, like it, but can you redo this mix this way? I'm like, I've got a different desk. But I put the SSL, lined it up as I'd lined up my Neve, put all the music through, and she's got some good ears, this girl. And I was like, do you know what? When I was A-Bing the mixes, I mean, obviously, musically, they're subtly different, but I couldn't hear a sound difference between the console, what the console had done to them. There wasn't Neve and SSL obviously different. So I sent the mix off, nothing happened. I came back to London and got another email, can you change it again? And it went back through the Neve this time. And there was never any comment about the sound change. It was amazing. But I just like the way of summing. I just think it's
so you are you are a fan of analog summing as opposed to a complete mix in the box.
Yeah, although I've just got HDX with the Omni, and it's with 32-bit. I'm starting to think maybe I can just do stereo out, but I've still got my summing gear there, and so I'm still working that way. But it's definitely improved a lot. There's a lot more headroom in the system.
Yeah, I mean, 32-bit and the new 60, the whole new architecture, I think, definitely has made an improvement. Now, you shared with us this afternoon that you are fastidious about your color coding. Tell us about your color coding system for your different tracks.
I was wondering. I did look on Pro Tools Expert to see if you guys have touched on that before, if anyone else has just made a decision, and I thought it seems to be everyone's decided themselves. So yeah. I just went for dark brown for drums, and then lightened it up for percussion, and then green, dark green for bass, lighter green for guitars. And I'm so used to it now. And I don't have to look. I look for the color. It's very quick. The vocals, shocking pink, the most shocking pink on Pro Tools where there is. Again, it's so quick to find.
Because it stands out.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not one of those guys. I like to be able to see all the region names, and even if there's multiple edits, I never switch that off. But the colors are there, and it's just, even if I don't put the regions to the track color, I still look at the track and I know where I am, regardless of the size. And that's part of the speed of using Pro Tools. And Pro Tools for me is all about speed. And
template sessions, presumably templates are also
templates, yeah. I have my own effects templates, and if like with the Symphonicity tour, I built a recording template. So generally, I'll build a template for tracks for the recording session, knowing who the band are. But the effects templates, that sits now as locked.
And you were talking about on that tour the 3 different reverbs. Do you use Reverbs plugins, or are you using external reverbs?
Plugins. That was obviously back then, and I used TC. So I had the VS3, and then I used the MD3 mastering plugin. And that was one of the things that kept me off HDX, because TC never migrated.
Indeed.
And yeah, that's really frustrating, actually. So I've got involved with Waves with H Reverb, and I think that's a really good plugin. So I've gone across, and I'm using the Oxford Reverb, which was always a good reverb, a backup. And I've had to accept TC have decided not to stay. Although they're still building AAX plugins, I just gutted they haven't turned it around. Maybe they're just so interested in PowerCore.
Well, it certainly, obviously being, I adopted HDX. I often joke that I probably have serial number 001 because I jumped from HD to HDX very early on, when there were virtually no DSP plugins at all, which was what I found incredibly infuriating. And it does seem that there are a number of brands that have chosen not to produce DSP versions of various plugins, and I too have found it frustrating. But I have in general found replacements for most of my plugins, and obviously there is a more restricted choice of DSP plugins, but I'm finding myself using the Avid ones. For instance, the Avid Pro Compressor and the Pro Limiter are now tend to be my go-to plugins. When I don't want to have to think about latency, I'll use the Avid EQ plugin. If I want to think about latency, if I don't want to think about, latency isn't an issue, then I'll look at the FabFilter Pro Q2. But it's very interesting to see how we've had, I've certainly had to choose different plugins when I went HDX, because not all of them are DSP. And when you've used HD systems for years and years, you just don't have to think about latency. And of course, if you start using native plugins,
it becomes an issue. Well, I'm a big Waves user, so I do have that issue. And I bought the Metric Halo full bundle, knowing that I'm AAX DSP, and that covers pretty much everything. But I'm still exploring the way ahead, and I'm hoping that more people will get on with AAX DSP.
What about with Waves? Have you considered getting one of their DSP hardware units to effectively get you back into Waves plugins on DSP?
Well, that's a bit like people say you're going to buy Universal Audio, and they're both good. I've got nothing against them. It limits the transferability of my system.
Yeah.
And my system is duplicated in Sting's studio. He's got a lot more I/O than me, but we've got the same computer and same processing and plugins. And we probably could buy a couple of boxes, but
yeah, it's another
thing to
factor.
Consider. And I did have Duende for a while, and that's when that threw up. That when I went somewhere else, I didn't have the hardware box, and I had to carry that. And I prefer not to, but we'll see. I'm not closing myself off to it.
What's currently on in your in tray at the moment?
I'm just finished mixing a radio track for a band called Vintage Trouble, who are on tour with AC/DC. And next week, I'm starting Connie Talbot's album. She was about to win, I think it was X Factor or Britain's Got Talent, and when she was 6. And she's been working quietly on releasing stuff in Asia. A mate of mine's produced it, so I'm going to mix her record.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. This has been Mike Thornton, Pro Tools expert at Jigsaw's base in London.